The scripture for today comes from Isaiah 35, 1 through 3. And I've been reading a lot in the Message version, so that's the one that I chose for today. Wilderness and desert will sing joyously. The badlands will celebrate and flower. Like the crocus in spring, bursting into blossom, a symphony of color and song. Mountain glories of Lebanon, a gift. Awesome Carmel, stunning Sharon, gifts. God's resplendent glory, fully on display. God awesome, God majestic. Energize the limp hands, strengthen the rubbery knees. Tell fearful souls, courage, take heart. God is here, right here, on his way to put things right and redress all wrongs. He is on his way, he'll save you. And from 1 Peter 4, 8 through 10. Everything in the world is about to be wrapped up, so take nothing for granted. Stay wide awake in prayer. Most of all, love each other as if your life depended on it. Love makes up for practically anything. Be quick to give a meal to the hungry, a bed to the homeless, cheerfully. Be generous with the different things God gave you, passing them around so all get in on it. If words, let it be God's words. If help, let it be God's hearty help. That way, God's bright presence will be evident in everything through Jesus, and he'll get all the credit as the one mighty in everything. On course to the end of time, oh yes.
How many of you have visited Arizona ever? Okay, great. So maybe you're familiar with some of the landscapes that we showed at the beginning. Some of those were taken when Marge's son was married in Tucson, about 6 years ago or so. Similar? 8 years ago, okay. And the rest were taken. So that was one of the advantages of serving in Arizona. We got to see some different parts of Arizona. So Byron and I served for 2 years with Marge and Will with the SOUP program in Tucson. SOUP used to stand for Service Opportunities for Older People, but now it stands for Service Opportunities with Other Partners. And anyone 25 or older can serve with SOUP, or families can serve with SOUP too. And it's the most popular program of Mennonite Mission Network, with hundreds serving in over 60 different sites, both in Asia, Europe, North and South America. And I wanted to read a few quotes from the March Anabaptist World that was entitled, Our Service Program's Dying. Mennonites have a history of seeking alternatives when confronted with lifestyles that do not represent Jesus' values. A society draws us into systems of injustice, oppression, and domination. We should revisit the idea of service as an alternative to such systems. And then another paragraph. Our service programs are far from flawless. Too often they accommodate those of privilege who have the resources to participate. At times they have perpetuated white saviorism. So I thought that was good to acknowledge that too. We are acquainted with 3 of those sites. My brother Don and his wife Shirley have served for a number of years in Phoenix. And all of the SOUP volunteers there are housed together. They have meals together. They serve in the same places together. And they pay a fee for their housing and their meals. And I also will talk about the Hopi Reservation a little bit later, as we visited there this year, and they have the program there. Some of the sites, room and board is provided. Okay. Of course, Tucson, with warmer weather, is a popular spot, and many of the supers that we met there have served for a number of years. And it could still be called service opportunities for older people there, as you can see from the picture. This was a potluck that we had one evening. We were able to attend Wednesday night Bible studies on Luke, and a former seminary professor, Gail Goober Kuntz, and her husband Ted served there, so she led the Bible studies, which was real interesting. We also had potlucks together, had a potluck with the VS unit that's there, and also went out for Sunday meals together sometimes. And some of them had more connection because they had their trailers parked together, and I think they had a happy hour at 4 o'clock on once a week, but we never went to that because we had an Airbnb with Marge and Will. In Tucson, everyone is responsible for finding their own housing and meals and their own service projects. We were giving a listing of about a dozen nonprofits, and we had to contact them and arrange our own service and times. Some of the choices were a food bank or picking fruit to give to the food bank. Byron did that one day, the first year we were there. Working in a library, a thrift store, or Casa Cardo, Casa Alitas, or Chirpa. Casa Alitas is a very large place, and I want to tell you a little bit of information about that one. It's a Catholic organization, and it offers shelter, necessities, and travel assistance, and a short stay after release from the Border Patrol or ICE. And in March, I happened to hear on the NPR radio, they highlighted Casa Alitas because they were worried that they were going to lose their funding because they have a lot of funding from the federal government, and the budget that was being proposed, they didn't know if Homeland Security would be funded as much as it had been, and so they were very worried that they might have to close down for a while. And their budget was $1 million a week, which I went back and looked at it yesterday because I wanted to make sure I remembered that it was a week, and it was. And it said that Border Patrol officers in Tucson encountered more than 300,000 people in the last 6 months from when they talked about it in March. And about half of them passed through Casa Alitas. And if they would have had to close, then the ICE would just drop the people off in the street or the bus stop where they were. And the cities really didn't have accommodations to help them find their way to a sponsor like we did, or to their family member who was here in the United States. We didn't apply to that one because they required a lot of references and background checks because they don't want people infiltrating their organization who are against immigration. But we did have some of the people who were here working there, especially the ones who spoke Spanish were really attracted to that service project. Okay, did you have anything to say about these fellas?
My job here is to provide color, and so you could imagine yourself perhaps in this group. They're mostly in their 70s. They're retired mostly. There were some farmers in there, and also a disproportionate number of people from Canada who were avoiding the Canadian winter, I would say. But otherwise, a range of white-collar retirees, I would say, and they tended to come to Tucson every year with either a trailer there or a condo, and they would tend to do this until they were about 80, and then they would not do it again. So that's the group. Some people were in their 60s, I would say.
Marge and I worked at the Enjoy thrift store in the mornings, and we sorted clothing each day. And we were the first sorting, and they had a lot of clothing that was donated in January, so they were so thankful for our help because otherwise they would have had to start turning clothing away. The store supports a house for victims of domestic violence and also an international program that translates languages into sign language.
The Bible.
Pardon? Oh,
Was that the Bible into sign language?
Yeah, I don't know.
They translate the Bible into sign
Sign
language.
language
Sign
for,
language.
in
It
different
turns out there's-
languages, yeah.
There's like
How
300
complicated.
sign languages in the world.
Yeah.
And so you got the American one and the British one and the Chinese one, and then they're setting up videos of people signing in different sign languages of the Bible.
They also hired some people who may have had difficulty finding another job. Last year, I did work at sorting books. I didn't this past year. As you can see, we had our masks on during that time. And Byron worked in the electronics. Last year, he went there along with me. Pricing was a challenge, as he was not really a shopper, but he had his computer for help. And also Jerry, the other volunteer from Minnesota, had been there quite a number of years. And I did notice that every morning he would go on the floor and check to see what sold, what he had priced. So I don't know if you want to say more about that.
Well, this job was a disaster, really. The thrift store is big. It had $100,000 of stuff sold every month, and trucks were just dumping stuff every day. And you could see we can't keep up because this is the electronics group, it's called, but it's just a dumping ground for everything that doesn't fit anywhere else. So if it had a cord on it or a battery, or even if it didn't, if it was a toy or a tool or sporting goods, anything, there it came. And we just couldn't keep up. Jerry's a retired physical therapist from Minnesota. He was good at just whipping it out of there. But the job was to clean the stuff up, see if it worked, and put a price on it and get it out on the floor. And you couldn't win at this. I mean, I was checking Google to see what new stuff costs and then try to price it 25 or 50% below that. But there was this supply-demand thing going on where some items you may as well throw them away. And in this pricing, the manager should have been doing this, but they didn't know how either. So they would let us do it, and then they would give us this feedback. And you knew you priced too low if you took your cart out on the floor and people were ripping it right off the cart before you put it on the floor. Yeah, and then there were other things which would sit there and had limited floor space. So then the managers would say that's priced too high, and you'd get like a computer printer in a box. It was brand new, and then there were already 4 of them out on the floor. And eventually the manager said, "Throw those printers away. We can't sell them. And even if we do sell them, they bring them back and say they don't work because they can't connect them to their computer." And then there were other items that just didn't sell, or it was just very, very difficult to. A sewing machine comes in and you look up and it's $1,500 new, but are these people going to be buying this sewing machine? I didn't know. I thought I'd make it $200 for this thing, but I put it out there for $199 or $175 or so. It sat there for a week or two, but finally it did go. One day I was cleaning up this edger. It was a battery powered edger kind of thing, and it was in fairly decent shape. But I thought, well, $25, and some big shot from North Carolina. This Enjoy outfit is from North Carolina mainly. He came through and he says, "Oh, you got this price way too low, son. We got to make money on this stuff, and that's $40-50 for that thing at least." And in Tucson, only the rich have grass at all. There was no market for this thing at all. But I popped it up to $40 and put it out there, and when we left, it was still there. So anyway, it was a interesting job, and in spite of the fact they make $100,000 gross every month, their expenses were high. The rent on the building was $25,000, and then they paid some workers, so they were making money, but not scads.
Well, Marge and I didn't have to price anything. Clothes were priced by children's or whatever. So that was an easier job in that way. One benefit of working in the same place is that we were able to visit with some of the staff and get to know them. Danny was deaf and could not speak, so she kept a notebook that we could write in. And Danny had a perpetual frown on her face. I just worked with her one time, and I knew from when we had gone through that she had a certain space where she liked to work, and I had to be there first because I had to reach in the clothing bin. But as soon as she arrived, I moved over, And if you write her some notes, she perks up a little bit, but she probably has a hard life.
Wave.
Yeah, if you waved to her, she would respond to you that way. But she was there every day. Mary Ann said that she could not meet her expenses on her Social Security check, so she was glad for a job. Loretta, who was a supervisor, could have had another job, but she shared her story of domestic abuse and also a sad story that her daughter suffered from domestic abuse but is not willing to leave her husband. And I didn't take any pictures this year, so don't have any from this year. And Byron's going to tell you about the next group of photos.
Yeah, so let's be honest, we're mainly down there for the weather. It's this is late January, early February, and it was 60, 70 degrees during the day and 40s at night, sometimes 30s. It was a cooler than normal winter. The natives were complaining. I didn't see that much to complain about. But my brother-in-law and I, Will, here, we decided to work with Mennonite Disaster Service, which was remodeling a building to house asylum seekers. And the name of this building, they named it Casa Cardo, which is Spanish for thistle. And the reason being, there's a nonprofit agency, Thistle Farms, based in Nashville, Tennessee, which put up a lot of the money to buy this house that we were remodeling. And their model was to provide help for women who were struggling to get back on their feet from either prostitution or drug addiction or trafficking or incarceration, and they would stay with them for a couple years and provide training and jobs and things. They had a pretty high success rate, so they were part of the effort to try that with asylum seekers in Tucson for a relatively long period of time. 2 years is what you would stay in this house. So we chose that partly because we could ride our bicycles over there. It was across town. It was about 8 miles, I would say. The bike lanes were pretty good. So we went over there and worked pretty much every day, 8 hours a day, and then we would take the long way back, go by the wash, and make it 15 or 16 miles on the way back. So it's a good life. You get home about dark, you come in the door and say, "Hey, what's for supper?"
Tell her to turn when you want to turn.
Oh, and then the next picture. So this is the building that we were working on renovating. This thing is about 100 years old. Apparently was built as a sanitarium back in the early 1900s. People with tuberculosis thought that moving to the southwest would help them, and so there were a bunch of these sanitariums built. The location was pretty good. It was close to Center City, and this is an old fortress. The walls are a foot thick of brick, and there's 3 stories there, 2 main stories, and a kind of a penthouse on top.
Next picture. Turn
What's
to the
that?
next picture. You can show that.
We could turn to the
Stories.
next picture. I'm being told to turn to the next
There's
picture.
3 stories.
There it is. This is kind of the front side, actually, with the porch. It's a pretty big building. You could put 5 apartments in there pretty easily, 2 on each of the bottom floors, and then one big penthouse-looking thing on top. The previous owners had kind of run it down some. It was apparently a hippie commune sort that they had goats and chickens here in the front yard, and it just needed a lot of remodeling. So a consortium of churches, the Mennonite Church being one, and then other civic groups, and then this Thistle Farms outfit put up $400,000 to buy this, and then I think we put a couple $100,000 into fixing it up. There'd be five apartments in there. You can see the soffit about to fall on these people that are standing on that porch there. That's unknown to them. And then the next one.
Did MDS pay for all the remodeling though?
MDS took on the job of the remodeling, yeah, which was a big job. And here are the 3 people that were kind of in charge of that. They're all from Shalom Mennonite Church. On the right is Tina Schlaba, and she's one of the pastors of the church there, and she knows Spanish well and was doing a lot of the interviewing process, trying to figure out who was going to be moving in. She would take them on tours of the place, and she also did a lot of She was furnishing the apartments as we were trying to get them done. The guy on the left is Don Lichty. He's 77 years old, a retired hospital administrator. He grew up on a farm actually in Shickley, Nebraska, where Ellen grew up. And you couldn't keep up with this guy. He was just a ball of energy. He was getting all the materials around, and he was trying to tell us what we should be doing, and then he'd be cross-legged on the floor under the sink working on the plumbing. He just was something. And in the off days, he'd go volunteer at the food bank or somewhere else like that. And then, so he was one of the Dons, and the other Don was Don Reinheimer, who was sort of in charge of the volunteers. There were groups of volunteers that would come in, and we didn't see as much of Reinheimer. His wife had just been diagnosed with colon cancer, I think. So, but he was around, and we had a lot of fun working with the two Dons. Lichty told us one day, he says, you know, most MDS workers, you tell them what to do, and they just go off and do it. You two guys just argue. And well, you know, we had some good ideas, but my brother-in-law is kind of a perfectionist when it comes to his carpentry, and I was just trying to stir things up, and we got along pretty well. And they appreciated us being there every day, and we were there for, I guess, 5 weeks or something. The whole process took about 6 months, I think, to remodel this. We didn't finish it, but we did some of it. Go ahead. So here we are. This is the stairway up to the penthouse apartment, and somebody put some cheap carpet on there, and they decided to take that off. So we were pulling the staples out of the wood, trying to decide what to do to fix that stairway up. The guy in the middle is Tim Widmer, who's from Washington, Iowa. I think his wife took this picture, and Cindy, yeah. Cindy told me that her best friend is Susie Schwarzenegger. And she also said I'm as sarcastic as John. So people know,
She's very
know each other.
perceptive.
We, one day, one of the Dons, Lichty, I think, told us, we gotta get this gas stove out of the penthouse. We're not gonna have any gas in this house anymore. It's gonna be electric stoves. And it's a narrow stairway. We had to take that handrail off of there in order to wrestle this thing down and out of there. And then about a week later, the other Don, Reinheimer, said, we gotta get that gas stove back up there because an MDS regional director is gonna be living in there for a week or two, and we can't turn on the electric stove. We need 400 amp service, and we don't have it yet from our volunteer electrician. So we wrestled that gas stove back up there, took the handrail off again. That sort of thing happens. This is one of the basement apartments. It was kind of in rough shape, this building. There were supposedly pack rats in there. I didn't see them, but we're building a wall there where we're gonna have the kitchen area, and Will's standing in the bathroom. There was a window between we wanted to close up that window. We didn't see the need for the window between the bathroom and the kitchen. So, next one. It was a good view of my neck. I was, I think, installing a shower vent at the time, and getting the vent connected through that wall of that 100-year dust up there was a bit of a trick. I tried to do just enough skilled stuff to avoid being put on the paint and cleaning. I was just one grade above.
Part
above
of your
that.
arguing.
I did some painting as well. Okay. And one thing, a nice thing about MDS is they kind of feel like they have to feed you. But this was a special day. A group from Phoenix had come down to help us install new cabinets and countertops. They had some expertise with that. So this was a picnic in the front yard of the house there, and shirt sleeves in January, and good time. Okay. These are three of the people who are either living there or were moving in. Again, the motto from the Thistle Farms is the women only. So there were going to be no men in this house, and the two women on the far side was Rocio and her daughter. They were from Bolivia actually, and Rocio was trying to start a business with a street food vendor truck in the university area. We rode our bicycles through the University of Arizona each day across town to get. This place was pretty close to the university. The lady in the front here is from Mexico City, I think. Myra, and she was at the time living in the basement of a Catholic church with her two daughters. She had two daughters, about 10 and 13, I would say. So she was really ready to move in, and she did move in, I think, the weekend after we left. I didn't know that much about the background of them. Myra didn't know English hardly at all, and apparently some sort of domestic violence type of background from Mexico City, but they were asylum seekers. Rocio had spent quite a bit of time in a detention center before she got here. Okay. And this is the same basement apartment after, it looks a lot better with the new cabinets and countertops. You can see that bathroom area to the back there. The flooring helps as well. So these are pretty big apartments, I think, and it's a big undertaking. The Mennonite Church, I think, was a big part of certainly getting things going, and then the maintenance on this was going to be $10,000 a month, they thought, and so the people living there were not going to pay anything. They were going to stay for up to 2 years, each one of them, and so it's a big undertaking to take on this sort of thing. I mean, if you think about, oh, should we do something like this? Well, it's a big undertaking, and the people were coming across the border at $750 a day, and we spent 6 months to remodel a house for 5. So it's kind of a drop in the bucket, but on the end, it's what you could do.
So we enjoyed attending Shalom Mennonite Fellowship, which is an active, inclusive congregation of about 75 people. They have Spanish and Swahili interpreters for some of the congregation. So the first Sunday it was kind of distracting to hear the interpreters talking, but you kind of just let it go the next times. There are Congolese immigrants who sang in a choir each Sunday morning. So this was one of their banners in the front of their sanctuary. And I kind of like the sanctuary sign. It had so many double meanings in that situation. And then Marge and I helped to tie comforters for MCC one morning and found out that Kansas and Ohio tie their comforters in different ways. So they compromised, and we found a way to do it. Some of the women from the church had made those. We attended a talk one Sunday evening given by a young woman who had traveled to Washington, D.C. to attend a hymn sing with about 150 other Mennonites to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Some of the Mennonites protested outside the building. That was in addition to the 150 that were inside the building. And this young woman had chosen to be inside the building. So she knew that she would be arrested because they weren't allowed to gather there. She didn't portray herself as a hero, but as someone who was touched and feels passionate about the suffering in Gaza. And she also knew that she had $50 in her pocket and that she would be released because they knew that is what would happen. And in fact, they said a charge like that is kind of like a traffic ticket in Washington, D.C. But she also realized that compared to other people who had ridden in the same police van, that they wouldn't have been in the same position that she was privileged to be in a position where she knew she'd be released. Okay. And this is another picture of the church, and they have a fairly large property, and you can see in the back there's a house that houses their voluntary service unit, which they have, is it 4 or 5 service unit workers there at this point in different areas. And then over here is a house, the office of Sherpa, which Byron's going to tell you a little bit about. So their trucks are all parked here, their pickup trucks.
So you can see the solar panels on the roof there. You see a lot of those in Arizona because the sun shines 300 days out of the year. But even there, this was a project that the church took on, and to be energy self-sufficient, you need batteries to store the electricity, and the batteries are $1,000 a kilowatt hour. So this was going to be 8 to 10 year type payback project, which isn't the best, but on the other hand, they're self-sufficient with their solar panels. So it's a small building, really. I mean, a church is, what, 75 members or so? It doubles in size in the winter when all the snowbirds come there, but they just do a lot of service things, and they have the voluntary service unit in the back, but also they started 20 25 years ago community home repair service. They called it Mennonite home repair actually back then, and this was emergency home repairs for people who needed it. It could be plumbing or electrical work or fixing windows or doors or heating and cooling type stuff. They didn't do any big remodeling projects, but there was a big need for this kind of thing. Particularly, Tucson has a lot of trailer parks, and there's some trailers in really rough shape in some of those areas. So this small service project that started 20, 25 years ago has grown into this thing now that's $13 million a year budget with full-time people employed, writing grants, and then they have 4 or 5 pickup trucks, which every morning load up stuff and go out and work mostly emergency home repair for people. They do more than half of their work in trailers and trailer parks. And so they have probably more need there than here, but that sort of thing is possible here as well. They get their money from, they install a lot of low-flow toilets because the city pays for those because they have water problems in Tucson. But they get a lot of money from the government and from the city to do these repairs. We didn't work there partly because they started at 7 a.m. in the morning. It was dark, and we didn't want to ride our bicycles down there too much. It seemed too much like work, actually, to start at 7, but we might have to do that next year. I don't know. And you run into some tough situations there. I was talking to Bernie, a Canadian farmer who was doing this, and probably one of those Wednesday night Bible studies. I said, "So, Bernie, how'd it go today?" He says, "Well, not well. I loaded up in the morning. I think it was him and another volunteer, and they were supposed to go out to a site, a trailer in a trailer park where a woman said, my washing machine won't drain. It just fills up and won't drain." So it sounded like probably a plugged drain or something. And so they went out there with what they thought might be the tools to deal with this. And he said, I walked in and was trying to get to the washing machine to see what was going on, fell right through the floor. The floor was just rotten from, I don't know how long this, whatever had been going on, but so now he's got this hole in the floor, and you know, they have a budget, they have a schedule, and none of this has been planned, so he's gonna have to do something, and he said, so then I tried to, you know, disconnect the thing to get it out of there, and he notices there's no hot water connection at all, it's just a cold water connection. He tries to unhook that, and the valve breaks off in his hand, so now he's got water everywhere, and it took all day just to try to, they have to decide then, well, how much of this are we gonna fix, and where are we gonna stop with this deal, and I suspect that maybe was one of the worst days, but probably not atypical.
I forgot to point out on that one, there's trailers here too that the soup volunteers can pay $200 a month to park their trailer there and then go to work. So Byron's brother, Gordon, and his wife, Sue, have served on the Hopi Reservation for 2 years. And 50 years ago, actually in 73, 74, right when I graduated from college, I served a VS unit. And I had 25 5th and 6th graders at that point. And this was the Hopi school. Now,
This is in northeastern Arizona in the high
right,
desert.
yes. And it's now called the Peace Academy and has 6 students. In another sad case of taking advantage of Native Americans, a principal embezzled funds and has served jail time for it, but it took a long time. And so the school has never come back like it was 50 years ago, but things change in 50 years too. So now they're renting part of the building to the extension. The village library is there, and actually they have another whole building where the school is held for the 6 students. And his brother worked in maintenance and driving the school bus, and his wife Sue taught in the school. They now have a Hopi director, and so they're trying to branch out to do different things in the community. Go ahead. It's called the Peace Academy now. That's the Hopi sun, and this is the Hopi rain cloud and corn on my shirt here. So the highlight of my trip was meeting two of my former students. I was only there one day and 2 nights, and I was showing them my former classroom where you could see the mesas out the window, and this woman walked in the room, and she heard that I was a former teacher, so she asked me names of one of my students, and I said Kim Sakakaku right away, and she said, oh, that's one of my 5 sisters. And so I was just shocked. She worked with the extension, and she said, and I actually had 2 of her sisters. Kim was in 6th grade and Debbie was in 5th grade. So she took my picture and sent it to Debbie and said, Debbie works across in the village at the elementary school. So she said she could come and meet me after work that day. And then she brought Laverne along, who was another student. This is Debbie. As you can see, they're kind of, all the Hopis are kind of short, so they remembered that I was the tall teacher. Anyway, I was so impressed at what Debbie has happened, and actually Byron came over and we were ready to go to dinner at a Hopi restaurant, so Debbie was able to go with us so I could visit with her for a longer time. She was kind of a quiet, dreamy 5th grader, as I remembered her. Sometimes she had to miss part of recess because she didn't finish her math homework. But she's had an exciting life. She's now a social worker, and right after high school, she traveled with the group Up With People, a singing and dancing group, and then she got her degree in social work, and I think since then she has worked on the reservation in different schools or different organizations, working with drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and now she's working with parents in the elementary school. So she's having parenting classes, and she said it used to be the parent-teacher organization, all they do is come for a meal and have a lecture. And she's putting them to work. She's having them help out with the teachers, get to know the teachers, and doing some exciting things. So she told me her husband was the athletic director and coach at the high school, which they didn't have a high school on the reservation when I was there. And she mentioned that he's 65 and not really thinking of retiring, and I thought, man, he's a lot older than her. But then I got to thinking, that was 50 years ago. She's in her 60s too, so that was kind of interesting. But that was really the highlight of my trip. Is this the last picture? Oh no, this is the 5 of the 6 students and Sue, my sister-in-law. So anyway, I think that's the end of the pictures. I was thinking about what a visitor to our congregation would notice if they looked for areas of service in our community. They could visit along with the refugee group that is very active. They could travel with Carol to the youth art team activities and NAACP. They could join the ELL volunteers that relate to the ones that Susie and Evelyn are active with. They could visit with professors, teachers, food service, and group home employees, and mental health professionals whose careers add so much to our community. They could also visit the World's Window, which was started by our congregation and is still sending money to artisans around the world. There are opportunities everywhere to shed some light in our world.